it a person or an animal or?
A good-sized man, or something that looks like a man.
Okay. You've had problems in the neighborhood before?
Yeah, my dog was killed here just recently. I don't know what it was.
Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses.
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sure.
Zia!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
Son of a bitch is about 6'9".
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh. Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, God, he's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
He's looking at me.
And the guy is on foot.
I don't know what... It's a big, real big person.
But it is a person.
Yeah, I'd say it was a person or somebody really big.
Good evening, folks. Welcome to Sasquatch Hypotheses. Tonight we're starting the show at a different time. I'm gonna do them Sunday nights at 9 o'clock. Because I've had a change in my work situation, so I won't be doing them Saturdays at 10. I'm gonna do them Sunday nights at 9 o'clock from now on, and it will be every week. So tonight we're going to interview Ryan, who's had several encounters. And he's going to talk about encounters he's had when he was a boy, and then someone, or at least one that he had as an adult. Ryan, you there?
Yes, I am.
How you doing? Go ahead and get started by talking about what was your knowledge of Bigfoot prior to your first experience.
Prior to my first experience, I was aware of Bigfoot. I was aware of it mostly in a sense that it was a story subject that my grandfather used to like to tell me about. He was, or is, more of a, I feel, he likes to use it as a story subject, entertainment subject. He's never actually told me of any encounters that he has had, although I do believe that he has had at least one encounter, and he just doesn't talk about it. So growing up, when I was young, he used to tell me stories about it, but it wasn't until I was probably around 10 or 11 years old, I think, somewhere around in there, maybe even younger. I was starting to grow an interest in the subject, and he took me to a screening of a documentary about Sasquatch, and I know I told you I was going to try and figure out what the name of that documentary was, but I wasn't able to find it. But he took me to see a screening of that in our high school gymnasium, and when this screening happened, the documentary was already at least a decade or more old. It was an older documentary about a group of researchers that went off into the British Columbia backcountry to try and find this creature in a place that they thought they would have the best luck, way up in the remote mountains of central British Columbia. And during the documentary, they related other stories of encounters, most famously the Ape Canyon event up in Mount St. Helens, but also some others, less well-known ones. Also the Patterson-Gimlin film, which obviously is probably the most famous. So other than his story, that was my first real major exposure to it. That would have been back in the very early 90s. And after that, I was hooked.
And how old were you when you had your first encounter?
Well, it's tough to say. It was a long time ago, but I want to say I was probably not much older than when that video occurred. I was probably only 12 years old, maybe. Yeah, I'm thinking I was probably around about 12 years old. Definitely several years before I could drive yet.
And what happened during that encounter? Go ahead and walk us into that.
Okay, so what happened was, I was out in the woods near the backside of Wickiup Reservoir and near Lapine, Oregon, out in this area called Browns Creek, and it's out near where Cascade Lakes Highway and South Century Drive come together. And there's this, at the time, there was this old mining cabin back out in the woods. And my mom was an enthusiast of, I don't know exactly what the term of it is called, urban archaeology or some stuff like that. Anyway, she liked to hunt for lost logging campsites. And in Central Oregon, there was lots of logging camps. And she was particularly interested in the Brooks-Scanlon and Shevlin-Hickson camps. These were railroad logging companies, and they'd move these, they'd lay tracks down into the woods, and they'd move these entire camps in on trains and set up, and they'd do their job, and then they would pack everything back up, and they'd move them back out and go on to the next site. Well, what she was interested in was she liked searching for the camp dumps, because she would collect, the old Coke bottles and old just the valuable old bottles and cans and tin signs and stuff like that. So that was what she liked to do, and so I'm thinking it was definitely during the summer or maybe the early fall. I can't remember if I was in school at the time or not, but it would have been in the late afternoon more than likely. And so she takes me out here, and this is about, as a crow flies, it's probably only about 10 or 12 miles from the house where we lived in Lapine. But out here, it's definitely a wilderness area, and so we go out to this old cabin, which is off the main road a ways. Have to walk in there. You can't drive up to it. The road is been abandoned for so long that it's completely overgrown. And if I remember correctly, I think there's a gate on it anyway. And so she was into looking for this stuff. I wasn't that into this stuff. It was boring to me. But being out in the woods there's the creek there, and there's some hillsides and some rocks to climb around on. And so I went off exploring while she's searching for this dump site, and she goes off one way and I go off another, and I'm walking down by the creek, and just kind of, skipping stones on the water and throwing sticks in the water and just being a kid. And I started getting this feeling that, something isn't right. Started feeling like something's probably watching me. And been out in the woods with my mom 100 times. This was a pretty common thing for us to do. And so I'm wandering along this creek bed, and there's some really thick willow bushes along it. And as I'm walking down it, I can kind of start to smell this odor. And it's kind of a musky odor. Trying to remember as best I can. It was a long time ago, but I remember it being kind of a foul carry-on mixed with just musky wet dog smell. And I don't know what to think about that. I know elk at this time. I know elk are kind of musky smelling, and so I think I'm thinking maybe that's what it is. There's nothing that I'm worried about. And so to get to where I'm trying to go, trying to walk down this creek, I have to try and make my way through this really thick willow bushes that are lining this creek. I'm walking up to them, and I'm kind of trying to find the best way to walk through them, and you can't see through them very far at all. They're that thick. So I finally find a bit of an opening that I kind of can start working my way through. And as I'm starting to enter into these willow bushes, I hear just this loud commotion on the other side of the bushes, still on my side of the creek, but on the other side of these willow bushes, and it sounds like something tearing off through the bushes and across the creek. I can hear lots of splashing and whatnot. And I take several steps back. I don't know what's over there. But I'm thinking, maybe it was an elk, and maybe I scared this elk or whatnot. So I take several steps back. Now, on the other side of this creek, there's a hillside, fairly steep hillside. It's loose rock and dirt, and it's been, just kind of exposed by the creek over the years. So there's nothing really growing on it too much. It's just rock and dirt and some exposed roots and whatever. And it crests into to kind of a hilltop, or just like flat ground at the top. There's trees up there and whatnot. So whatever this is, it takes off tearing across the stream, gets across the stream in just a few steps. I mean, it wasn't more than probably 10 or 15 feet wide and not very deep, maybe a foot or so. And it takes off tearing up the side of this hill. Like I said, I back up a few feet, and I can see the top of the hill over the willows. And what I see is this black, hairy creature climbing up very, very fast. It was climbing extremely fast up the side of this hill, and it's a pretty steep hill. It's more than 45 degrees, and it is. The first thing that strikes me is I'm seeing a bear, and so I'm watching it tear up this hillside, and I'm noticing that its front paws, because it's going up on all fours, I'm noticing that its front paws are actually grabbing onto roots and rocks and stuff that are sticking out of the hillside to help pull itself up. Bears don't do that. And it never turned around. I never saw its face. I just saw the back of it. And it gets up to the top of this hill, which is probably only about 15 or 20 feet up. And when it gets to the crest of it, it just stands straight up and takes off running out into the woods. And I could hear it tearing through the woods. It's not like it just stepped out of sight. It kept going. Well, that scared me to death. I turned around. I went back to where I knew the area my mom was going to be, which was back of that cabin. That was our meeting up area, and I take off running back there, and it's a good little ways. It's probably about a quarter mile or so, and so after I get down the trail a ways, I'm still running and everything, but I'm not running as hard. I don't feel that feeling of being watched anymore. I don't feel that terror, but I'm definitely confused about what I had just seen. And as I'm getting to this cabin, I see my mom coming from the other direction to meet me, and which was odd. It wasn't our meet-up time yet, so but I see her coming, and I told her I wanted to go home. We had to get out of here. I just saw something. And at the time, I'm thinking I'd still seen a bear. But I told her I'd just seen a bear, and she's like, yeah, we need to go ahead and get out of here. And she said that she didn't feel good about the area either, so we walked out to the truck and we left, or the car out. I think she had a car with them. And so we left. And And that was the extent of my first encounter, and I didn't put too much thought into it because I'm still, only about 11 or 10 or 11, and as far as I'm concerned, what I saw was a bear at the time. So that was the first encounter.
So at the time, you were convinced it was a bear, even though you saw it clutching and grabbing at roots and so forth. Did you have some issues justifying that in your mind, or how'd that work?
Yeah, I did. I had some issues justifying what I had seen because I know that bears don't have hands, and I know that bears can't grab things with their paws, and but at the same time, at this point in my life, Bigfoot is just a tall tale. Bigfoot is a story that my grandpa likes to tell me to try and scare me. And Bigfoot is not a real creature as far as I'm concerned yet. I know that I had seen that video or that movie that he had taken me to see already at this point, but it's still not registering to me at this time that Bigfoot could actually be a real creature. And later on,
did you try to associate it? I mean, with the hands and everything. I'm sure that your young mind was trying to make sense of what it saw, and you in the end, you fell onto bear. But at any point, I mean, did you try to say, well, was that a person? Was it a hunter? Was it, or did you just go to bear and that was pretty much where you stopped?
Well, I never felt good about the idea of it being a bear because it didn't make any sense to me to be a bear. For one, it didn't look like a bear. It didn't act like a bear. It certainly didn't move like a bear. And when it got to the top of the hill, a bear is not going to stand up and run off. So I had serious issues with it being a bear, but at the same time, I didn't know what else to justify it as. It wasn't until later on in my life that I really, got into the Bigfoot phenomenon and was watching documentaries and movies and reading books and stuff. And one day it just finally dawned on me that had to have been what I saw. There was no way to categorize what I had seen as a bear. It had to have been a Sasquatch.
So would you say that the reason that you just decided it was a bear was because of the size and the hair? It had to be a bear, and that you might have just imagined the hands clutching and that kind of thing? You think that's what happened?
Yeah, I think I was just trying to reach for something that I knew existed and that I had actually seen before. And I've got to preface this by saying that what I saw wasn't an 8-foot or 9-foot Sasquatch. It was a smaller one. It was bigger than me, but not bigger than a full-grown man. Although it was a lot broader and built more like like what you picture a Sasquatch being built like. But if I had to guess, I would say it was a juvenile or something because it was not just this monstrously huge animal like some of these reports that I've heard about. So I'm thinking what I saw was probably a younger one. And you and I had talked the other night about, I had went sometime later. My mom and I were talking about this subject again, and I asked her when she had come up to me out there at the cabin, and I'd said I wanted to go. I'd seen a bear, and she said that she wasn't feeling good about the area either. I asked her, I was like, what were you talking about? What did you mean by that? And she's like, she was out on the far end of the cabin, and she had just gotten this feeling that she wasn't safe, like she was someplace she wasn't supposed to be, and it had just came on over her suddenly. It wasn't like she'd felt it the whole time, and she just felt like she was being watched, and and she said that there was a couple of times that she thought she could hear something off in the woods, but she never could see anything, and the feeling of being watched was just so overpowering that she was actually coming to get me to tell me that it was time to go anyway when we ran into each other at the cabin.
So basically, you both got spooked at the same time, which would imply to me that there could have been more than one. Especially if the one you saw was a juvenile, Mama was probably around there somewhere.
You know, and that's what I was thinking too. And you know, I actually didn't put that theory together until you had brought it up the other night when you and I were talking. It actually hadn't occurred to me that maybe that was what was going on. I had always kind of thought, well, maybe the one that I had saw had snuck past her, and that it was the same one. That I do have to admit that your theory seems to make more sense.
Well, yeah, the timing from what you said, where you both met back at that one point at the same time, and I believe you said that your mother was about the same distance away as you were, so it took you all about the same amount of time. So she must have headed back at the same time that you did. And that to me would imply that there was more than one, that one was watching her and then one was watching you. And that, in being a juvenile, there should be at least a mother around there somewhere.
Absolutely. And like I said, it hadn't really entered my mind until you and I talked about it, but it makes a lot of good sense.
Right. So what? And then how much longer before your next encounter happened?
All right. So I'm estimating that one happened when I was 10 or 11. So I was fairly young, but I was well experienced and versed in the woods, and so I know that my next one happened when I was 16. I know that it happened when I had just recently turned 16, and the reason I know this is because my dad had helped me buy this GMC pickup right around my 16th birthday, and I only had it for a few months before I fell asleep at the wheel and totaled it. So I had the truck at the time of the sighting. So I know that this one happened within late April, May, or early June. It's the only time period that could have happened around my 16th birthday, so that would have put it around I'm trying to think of what year that would have been. I guess that would have been around 1998. So anyway, so I was in high school, and I was in a forestry class, and my forestry teacher had come up to me and had told me about an apprenticeship that the Forest Service was doing that year, where they were taking applications from students from my school district and the school district south of me, the Crescent School District, and they were going to hire one student from each school, an apprenticeship for the summer, to go in and learn how the Forest Service works and work for the summer setting up logging jobs. And that sounded cool to me. You know, it was a job, a paycheck, and it kept me outside. So I was all about that. So he helps me write fill out the application and write up a short resume, and I actually got the job. And so the job is working 4 days a week, 10 hours a day during the week, out of the Crescent Ranger District down about 16, 15 miles south of La Plaine. And what we do is we'd go out every day, and we were marking trees and setting up boundaries for these different timber skills. And we'd go out one day or for a couple of days, however long it took, and we'd actually walk the perimeter of the timber sill, and we'd mark the boundaries, and then we'd go in with paint guns and we'd go in and we'd actually mark the trees that were going to be harvested. And it was a great job. I loved the job. And we're out in this, on this particular occasion, we're out in this area, would have been south of Crescent Lake, Oregon. It's absolutely ironic, the name of the area. I almost hate to even say the name of the area. It's called Wendigo Butte. And that's where we were setting up this timber sale. And so we had already gone in there. I hadn't gone in there. Somebody on the crew had already gone in there and had set up the perimeter. And it's on this fairly steep hillside, and it runs up the hillside from this dirt road, and it goes all the way up to a ridge. And then the perimeter follows the ridge for a couple of 100 yards, and then it shoots back down the hillside to the road. So it's only a couple of 100 yards wide at the top, but it's a good half or 3/4 of a mile wide at the bottom. It's a fairly good sized timber sale. And the way we would do this job was there was 4 of us. There was this older gentleman named Mike. He's it's a Smith. It's not his real name. I'm not going to use any of the real names, but I'll call him Mike. And he was an ex-logger. He'd been in the woods his entire life, and he had at some point he'd transferred over to the Forest Service and was working for them now. And then there was this Native American lady, and there was another student, the student from the Crescent School District that had gotten the job doing the same thing as me down there, the apprenticeship. And so the way we do the job is one person would start out along the boundary, and they would take off walking up the boundary, marking the trees, and they'd do about 100 or 150 or so foot wide swath, and basically we're just follow a swath all the way around the perimeter. So this person would start up the hill, and then about 10 minutes later, the next person would go, and they would start their swath right on the edge of his. They'd use what he had already painted as their boundary. That's why we'd space them out about 10, 15 minutes, and then so on and so forth until everybody was going up the hill. And because of the nature of this particular sale, making a big U, the first person that went in would also be the last person. Well, I guess it wouldn't be the last person, but everybody should finish about the same time, just because of the way that the timber sale was shaped, and obviously the person on the inside can't get past the person on the outside. But anyway, on this particular day, I was the one that was going to take the outside and follow up the perimeter. So these were long days, you know. Once we went into the woods, we'd be out there all day. So I had a Forest Service backpack on, and in my backpack I had a whole bunch of cans of paint, and I had lunch and a couple of 1 gallon jug of water and some stuff like that. And so I take off on my swath, and I start marking these trees, and around about noontime or so, I make my way up to the ridge line, to the very top, and I work down the ridge line for, I don't know, probably another half hour or so, just to get established and make sure I'm good in the head of the next person coming up. And I go ahead and I sit down and I take my lunch break. I'm hungry, you know. So I'm sitting there on a log, and I'm eating my lunch, and I feel like something's watching me. It wasn't a really an overpowering feeling at first, but I just feel like there's something else out there. I'm not alone. And I actually just chalked it up to being the next person coming up behind me, because I didn't know really who the next person was. I kind of thought it was the other student, but I figured whatever it was probably one of them, and they were just they could just see me from wherever they were working. And so I didn't think anything of it. But the feeling didn't really go away. It just kind of stayed. And so I finished up my lunch and I pack everything back into my backpack and I throw my backpack back on and I start back to work. I got a little bit of this ridge line left to go, and then I'm going to start back downhill. And so I'm working down this ridge line, and whatever this is, I can still feel it. It's still there. But the feeling of it washing me is starting to get more and more intense. I was starting to wonder, maybe there's a bear up here. Maybe there's a cougar up here. It's definitely bear and cougar mountain lion country. And so I still don't think too much of it. I keep working. I make it to the end of the ridge line there where the boundary was, and it shoots back down the hill. So I start working my way back down the hill, and as I'm working down the hill, the feeling is still there, and it's just getting worse and worse. And I notice that I can hear whatever it is. I can hear it moving through the brush. It's not loud. It's not tearing through the brush, but I can hear whatever it is, kind of pushing branches away to the side and stepping on the pine needles and the little twigs and whatever that are on the ground. And I turn around several times and I never see anything. I never saw anything. But whatever it was there. There was definitely something behind me, and at one point, it wasn't very far behind me at all. Probably no more than 15 or 20 yards. And I'm doing as best I can to work down the hill. It's at the rate I'm going, it's still another couple of hours till down to the road at the bottom. But as this feeling just keeps getting worse, that whatever it is watching me, and it's getting closer, and I can hear it. At first it was just I could feel its presence there, but then I can start hearing it. Fear is starting to come over me. I'm starting to get really, really nervous, and at one point I actually yell out behind me, calling my coworkers by name. Is like, is that you? Are you guys playing a trick on me? Are you guys joking with me? And I never hear anything. Whatever it is, it doesn't answer back. And I lose it. I can't handle the stress and the paranoia and the fear that I'm starting to become overwhelmed with. And I dropped my gun, my paint gun, and I just took off in a dead sprint down the mountain. And a couple of hours of tree marking doesn't actually equate into that far of a run when you're running downhill. I probably made it down to the bottom of the hill in only about 5 or probably less than 10 minutes at least. And I feel like whatever was behind me is probably following me, probably running after me. I never looked back. I just ran and ran and ran until I got down to the road. And once I got to the road, I had booked it up the road to where our truck was. And once I was down on the road and running, and didn't have to worry about running into a tree or tripping over a log or something, I glanced back over my shoulder and I never saw anything. There was nothing there. And so I keep on running though, and I come around this corner, and there's the truck, and there's Mike, the old ex-logger, and then there's the Native American lady, and they're already down there. The other guy, the student, he hadn't made it down yet, and so I'll run up to them. I'm just out of breath. I'm dying, and they're looking at me like, what's wrong with you? And I'm trying to regain my composure and regain my breath, and I was like, there's something up there. And they're like, what'd you see? I was like, I didn't see anything. That's the problem. I couldn't see it. And I gotta say that the timber up there wasn't all that thick. The underbrush wasn't horrible. There was some manzanita up there, and some reprod up there, but it wasn't just horribly thick where you couldn't see very far at all. So that was part of what bothered me, is whatever it was able to hide pretty good, because I just never could see it. And so Mike, he's like, where's your paint gun? I was like, I dropped it up there. It's still up there. And he's like, well, go back and get it. You know, how far did you make it? Are you done with your swath? And I was like, no, I'm not. It's still probably halfway up the hillside. I just dropped it. I took off running. I couldn't handle the stress up there anymore. And he told me that I needed to go back up there and get it. And I was like, no, not a chance. You can fire me right here if you want, but I am not going back up there. And he was a pretty good old guy. He was pretty understanding, and he was like, fine, I'll go up there, I'll grab it. And he was like, do you know about where it is? And I said something along the lines of, yeah, it's about where the tree stopped being painted. And he didn't think that was that funny, but he takes off walking back up there, and he leaves me down there with the Native American lady. And she asked me, she's like, what do you think it was? Do you think it was a bear, or do you think it was a mountain lion or something? It's like, I don't know what it was. I have no idea. I've seen bears and mountain lions in the woods before. I didn't get the feeling that I was being followed by a mountain lion or a bear like I would think I would get. And she just nonchalantly, and she is a Klamath native. She was from that area. Her people were from that area. She very matter-of-factly asked me, she's like, do you think it was a Sasquatch? And I was like, oh, I don't know. I mean, whatever it was was able to make me just feel absolutely in fear for my life. But I don't know that it was a Sasquatch or anything. And so Mike comes back down a little bit later, and he says that he couldn't find the gun. He said he found where I had finished painting, or had stopped painting, not finished painting, but he couldn't find the paint gun anywhere. He said he looked all over for it, and that I must have thrown it in my haste or something. And I said, did you see anything up there? He's like, no, I didn't see anything up there. And about that time, the other kid, he came out of the woods, and he asked what we were all doing back there already, and I told him that something was up there on the hillside. And he's like, something like what? And I said that I didn't know what it was, but it was something super creepy, and it was following me down the ridge line, and then had started following me down the hillside, that it actually drove me out of there. And he said that he had a pretty bad feeling up there too. He felt like there was something in the area watching him, but he also said that he could smell something. He said he could smell roadkill up there. He said that he thought there was like a dead elk or something up there somewhere, and that it had given him the creeps, but he had never seen anything either. And so long story short, I ended up paying for that paint gun. But we went ahead and we got out of there that day, and they actually put me on a different timber sale. I didn't go back to that one, which I was kind of thankful for.
So let me ask you a question. Had you you said you had also smelled the stench that the other guy had smelled as well when You were up there, or you
Yeah, yeah. When I was talking to you the other night, I had said that I had smelled that smell also, and I had forgotten to mention that tonight. But yeah, I had smelled that smell also, that dead, rotting, musky smell, and apparently this other student who, as it had turned out, was actually the next one down from me. He was on the swath right next to mine. He said he had smelled it also.
So even though, I mean, the skeptics are out there, I'm sure, are screaming that you didn't see nothing. You know, it's very ambiguous. Why don't you explain exactly what your thought process was, and what caused you to rule out any of the other animals and make you take off down the hill and didn't want to go back up there, and what was your thinking there at the time?
My thinking at the time was that I had been in the presence of bears. I had been in the presence of mountain lions before, and I just didn't feel like that was what was out there. And whatever was back in the woods and behind me was moving very methodically. It was staying out of sight, but it wasn't staying silent. It wasn't going out of its way to not be heard. It was just going out of its way to not be seen. Mountain lions are obviously extremely quiet. I think it's safe to say that anyone would agree that if a mountain lion doesn't want you to hear it, you're probably not going to hear it. A bear, on the other hand, you're going to hear it, but you know, we have black bears down there, and they're just not going to mess with you. They're going to try and stay away from you. There's not many times I can remember hearing about a black bear that is so interested in you that it overcomes its own natural fear of you and just follows you around. I know that it does happen.
So at some
really
point,
don't think that.
So at some point, you got the impression that whatever it was that was following you was more intelligent, maybe, than a bear. Would that be an accurate way of putting it?
Yeah, I would say that whatever was following me was observing me and was intelligent enough that it could stay hidden. Like I said, it was fairly large timber, but it wasn't very thick undergrowth. It wasn't very brushy, and there wasn't much reprod on the ground. So,
well, I understand.
Whatever was.
I understand that in hindsight we can draw those conclusions, but I was wondering if specifically at the time, did you at some point come to the same conclusion that whatever this is intentionally staying out of sight and is stalking you or whatever?
Yes, I definitely felt that whatever it was purposely staying out of sight. I knew at the time that the only way this thing could stay out of sight was to actually hide behind the trees. And I
imagine,
I feel that.
I imagine that's the point at which you actually, the terror actually started to rise pretty significantly.
Yeah, I didn't feel so bad when I just felt like I was being watched. Like, you know, I've walked underneath of a cougar in a tree before, and I felt like I was being watched. And I didn't have, and then I, you know, get a little further along, and I turn around and look behind me, and I could see the cat up in the tree. That wasn't the feeling I had. The feeling I had was that something intelligent was stalking behind me and was smart enough that it knew that that hiding behind the tree, I wasn't going to see it, and I think it was smart enough to know that I wasn't going to go looking for it either. And I think that was what instilled the most fear in me, was I knew that whatever was following me was smart.
Yeah, when I saw the Bigfoot looking in the window, that was the point where it was the same situation. At first I thought it was a person. I was okay with that. Then I thought it was some stranger that I didn't know. And I was a little less okay with that. But I'm from Boston. I was about to yell at him and tell him to take off before, we come out there and whoop his butt. But once I realized
Right.
that, once I realized it wasn't a person, that it was an animal, and that this animal had intelligence, that's when the fear just went right through the roof. That it's, that realization that this is something that is as smart. It's not an animal. It's smarter than an animal. It has intelligence. It's thinking. You could see it in its eye. I could anyway. I could see it in its eyes. That's where the terror hit me. And I was just wondering if you had to say if it was a similar situation with you once you realized that this thing, whatever it is intentionally. It has a brain. It's got intelligence. It's intentionally staying behind trees. It's not like a cougar. It's not like a bear that's just kind of meandering around behind you and maybe trying to keep a distance. But a bear isn't going to hide behind trees, and a cougar will probably get up in a tree maybe. But I think a cougar would crouch down on the grass or something like that. It's a whole different story, and I was just curious if that was at the point where you dropped the can and said, "I'm out of here,"
Well, at this point in my life, after the first experience that I had, this is several years later, I had really started getting into the whole Bigfoot thing, and I think that in my mind at the time, I was already playing with the idea of wondering if this was a Bigfoot behind me. I had already established that by this time I thought what I had saw at the creek back with my mom was a Sasquatch, and was more open to the idea that these creatures were obviously real, and that they weren't stupid creatures, that they weren't just animals, that they had an intelligence level. And of course, I had read lots of books and watched lots of shows, and I had seen similar stories of these things stalking people through the woods. And so, on top of all this actually happening to me at the time, my mind is also running wild with these other stories running through my head also. So imagine I got myself pretty worked up, more so than I even should have. And the idea that there was a intelligent creature purposely staying out of sight and knowing when I was going to turn around and look was maddening.
A lot of people report that they can hear the thing like walking, and then when they stop, it would stop. Did you hear anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. If I wasn't moving, it wasn't moving either. I would start walking, and a few seconds would go by, and it would start moving too, and I could hear it taking steps. Whatever it was large and it was heavy, and the way that it sounded like it was walking. It was definitely on. It didn't sound like it was on four legs. And keep in mind also that I'm not just walking in a straight line. I'm doing these sweeps, painting these trees. So I'm walking side hill as opposed to just downhill, and I'm cutting back every 100 feet or so, and going back the way I had come. And whatever it was not only following me down the hill, but it was following me along the hill also while I'm making these sweeps. And it doesn't take very long of that going on before it just starts to drive you mad.
Yeah. But at what point, I mean, did you very early on start thinking, maybe this is a Bigfoot, or was it pretty close to when you took off down the hill that you started to think that?
It was pretty close. It was when I decided that it was a Bigfoot was when I took off running down the hill, because in my mind I'm trying to justify that whatever it is a bear or a mountain lion or one of my coworkers messing with me. I held out for a long time, just thinking it was one of my coworkers messing with me, because my coworkers were the only other things out there that I could think of that would have the kind of intelligence level to be doing whatever this creature was doing. But yelling to them.
Was there anything in particular? I mean, other than them not responding when you yelled for them, because if they were trying to mess with you, they probably wouldn't have responded anyway. But was there anything in particular that was there a sudden shift from thinking it was coworkers to thinking it was Bigfoot or whatever? Was there a sudden shift? Was there something that occurred that made you think that?
Yeah, the sudden shift came when I smelled the creature. As I was working down this hill, I had gotten to where the terrain kind of changed a little bit. It became a bit steeper, and I had to take a different path, kind of because the forestry cell boundary kind of took a sharp curve off to the right down the hill, and when I made that sharp curve and started going down that way, the wind was now coming from a different direction, and suddenly I could smell it. I had never smelled anything up until this point when I had changed direction, and it had started, and the wind had changed direction, and then I could smell it, and then that the memory of when I was a kid down at that creek, that it came back to me, and I didn't know what the smell was, but I recognized it, and I associated it with the creature that I had seen down at the creek, and all of that came rushing back to me, and that was the moment that I thought, this is one of those, and I dropped the gun and I ran.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
I think there is and I've heard this from other people. I've heard this on Coast to Coast AM, and I've heard this on Sasquatch Chronicles, and I think that deep down, that smell, whether you know about Bigfoot or believe in Bigfoot, I think that smell triggers something in you, and you know that whatever is around you is not good. And I think that's what happened to me.
Well, I've never personally smelled that smell, but actually, I think I might have in that barn out behind my grandmother's house, but I'm not positive. I mean, I didn't have that kind of reaction to it, but it could be because I just expected it to be the smells of a barn.
Well, I didn't have that reaction to it the first time I smelled it when I was a kid, and you didn't have that reaction to it. You were a kid also, and I don't think something about smelling it that first time when I was a kid, it didn't have that effect on me, but later on, when I'm a teenager and I smelled it and I already had an encounter to bounce that off of, that's when it became troubling and scared me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there again, the smell that I smelled was in a barn, and I know that there was rotting hay in there. So, I'm not so sure if I was smelling. I actually still don't know to this day if it was the rotting hay or if it was the Bigfoot that I was smelling. I suspect the Bigfoot was hanging out in that barn because nobody ever used it. It wasn't in use. Hadn't been for years. So.
Right.
So,
well,
go ahead.
Well, to round the story out, to finish it off, I had mentioned that there was this Native American lady that I worked with, and she was, for all intents and purposes, she was the boss. She was the supervisor and everything, and she had this was still very early on, and after I'd gotten the job, and I'd only been there maybe a couple of weeks at this point, so she hadn't really warmed up to me yet. I think she viewed me and the other kid as more of a babysitter job than anything else. So she wasn't really, she didn't talk to us much. She wasn't warmed up to us much. And I had mentioned that she asked me point blank if I thought it had been Sasquatch. And I said, I don't know. maybe. I think it could have been, but I don't know. And that's where it ended. I asked her why, and why she would ask me that. She did not want to talk about it. She did not want to talk about it at all. I think she just wanted to know if that's what I thought it was, but she wasn't interested in entertaining the subject any further than that. But towards the end of the summer, near the end of the job, you know, I'd been there a couple of months, and she'd warmed up to me, and she would talk to me more regularly, and I had said that the old man Mike, he had went up there, and he had looked around for my gun, and he didn't find it, and couldn't find it anywhere, and that he had come back down and given up, and that I ended up having to buy another gun, which wasn't cheap, especially on what I was making at that job. But do you remember I'd asked him if he'd seen anything up there? And he said, no, he hadn't seen anything up there. Hadn't heard anything, hadn't seen anything. And that was the end of it. Well, right before I'm leaving this job and going back to school, I'm talking to this Native American lady about some other subjects, and we get talking about that day again when I had been up on that job, and she says, you know, a few days later I was talking to Mike about that, and he said that when he was up there, he had looked everywhere. He looked all around for that paint gun, and that he never did find it. But he said while he was up there, that he got the feeling that he was being watched, and he could smell something, and he got totally creeped out and did not feel comfortable up there, and that he had hightailed it out too. And so he hadn't actually spent hardly any time looking for this gun. He'd gotten up there, glanced around, realized that he wasn't alone up there, and gotten back out of there. And I always thought that was interesting. That I don't know if it was pride or putting on a good face or whatever, but when he came back down, he had never mentioned that he had seen or heard anything.
After you came back down and you were standing around the truck, did you look around to see if there were any more that were just standing around there watching you all down by the truck?
No, I don't. I was pretty well engaged with telling them what had happened up there, and I had never, at this point, I had never heard of these things being in groups, or, you know, I thought they were absolutely solitary creatures, and it didn't cross my mind that there might be more in the area. So
oh, yeah.
I mean, obviously when I was running back to the truck, I was keeping my head on a swivel, and I was looking for anything. You know, I was expecting at any moment for something to come out and tackle me or whatever. But when something about being back at the truck and being with them made me feel a lot more comfortable. And I knew that there was a gun in the truck. There was always a gun in the truck, and so I felt better, and I felt safe down there. And I think it gave me a little more courage also that Mike didn't have any problems walking back up in there by himself, you know, thinking, well, if he's fine doing that, maybe I'm just overreacting.
Right. Well, Ryan, we're pretty much out of time, and I know you have a third story to tell. I think I'll have you come on the show next Sunday at 9:00, if that's okay with you, to tell your third story, which I think is the most interesting of all of them for many reasons. Are you up for that?
Yeah, the third one is definitely the one that made me decide that I wanted to actually pursue and get out looking for these creatures. So,
all right,
I'm interested to tell that.
So you're going to be okay coming back next week?
Yep. Yes, I'll be fine with doing that.
All right, well, we're going to go ahead and close the show then. I want to thank Ryan, and once again, if you all have a story to tell or any other reason to get a hold of me, here's the information. And until next week, y'all take it easy.